Today's topic is going to be about the opener and closer, so it's just differentiating star roles between CSGO teams, or specifically how star roles are kind of divvied up in the best teams, so that the star players impact the round in different aspects of the round. And the reason I was thinking about this was I was watching a podcast from Semphis on Peaker's Advantage. It's a great podcast. You should watch it. But basically, his idea was that in CS:GO, the third man in will eventually be the carry role, so to speak. It will be the cold zero role, and the reason he thinks that is because you revenge frag the opening like gambit, which is your tactic or maybe your aggressive players, and then you win the post plant situation or the retake situation or whatever it is. And the reason he considers this liable to become like the star role or the carry role is just because you get more consistency out of it. There's a when you're in a traditional star role, you're opening up the round, but or you're entry fragging in like tabs in for instance, or twists now, or config. And while that's an amazing like you can create amazing impact from that, the problem is that it can be very inconsistent. So if you're just off your form one day, it can go off. Whereas in the third man in, you need skill, but you also need great game sense and you need great consistency, and that's something that you want from your star player. So, in that sense, you can think about it as the two star roles you want are an opening star player and a closing star player. And if you think about the compositions of teams where you can have like one run through like four stars depending on the team, when you have one star, you're basically hampering the effect of how do I say this? Basically, when you have one star, you're putting a lot of burden on the in-game leader. So, for instance, the two teams I can think of right now that have this problem is Big, where Tabson is, I think, the only legitimate star, and the rest of the team has to play off of teamwork, has to play off of tactics in order to win games for that team. And then the other team I think might go down this path is the current Navi, because I don't think any of the players beyond Simple are in particularly good form. So it's going to depend a lot on their tactics, a lot on their teamwork, and it's going to take a long time if they decide to stick with this roster, because if you just look at what Zeus did with Gambit, that took like 3 to 4 months just to be good, just become a good upset team. So I think something similar might happen here. And Gambit did have a better spread of talent. Like Simple was obviously one of the great talents in CS:GO, but when Zeus went to Gambit, he actually had two really good players that we didn't know about it then, but they turned out to be very good, Adren and Hobbit. And then Mo himself was, inconsistent, but like a generally stable opera, at least in the tier 2. So at least he had someone to work with. Whereas like the forms of Navi players right now beyond Simple is pretty eh. And then I think the more standard way to think about it, or standard way teams are formulated, is around 2 stars. And the reason I was thinking about this was because I was watching some VODs from 2013, specifically the very games versus NIP at ESEA 13. And this is a weird game because NIP wins 2-0. But if you look at the games, I actually feel in terms of strategy, in terms of tactics, and in terms of like team play. Oh, actually, not in terms of team play, but like in terms of the first two, I felt like Very Games outplayed NIP by a large amount. But NIP was better on the team play, was slightly better on the team play. Say it was much better on skill. So even though MBK went fucking crazy in that particular series, NIP wins out all of the like clutch situations, or not all of them, but like a majority of them. They win out these small mans. They win out a bunch of hero plays. And this is a great example of what happens when you don't have like a closing star. So MBK was going fucking crazy, but beyond that, like Existence just in-game leader. Smiths is like, he wasn't bad, but he wasn't. I don't think he was a star player for that team. At least what I saw in that series. And then Scream and Kenny S weren't particularly impactful during that series. Scream, famously, he was someone Existence was never able to activate, and the only person who I could make him a great like star player was Shocks, whereas with Kenny S, this was incredibly early in his career, so I don't really blame him. Um, but this is an incredibly important like series if you're just thinking about this theory, just because it's clear that what very games need is somebody who can win out these situations that NIP keeps stealing from them. And then this is what happens because they bring in Shocks, and then they play again at Star Series 7, and this time Very Games wins pretty handedly, I'd say, because the tactics are still like way above what NIP was throwing out there. The CT side was reading NIP well still, and then when NIP started to win those hero plays, they still had Shocks in the round, and then Shocks could either even it out or just straight out win those. So like the turning points of that game started to shift towards Very Games, and that's when Very Games starts beating NIP. And so that's kind of how I've been starting to think about it. Is you need two stars, one as an opener and one as a closer. And this is how the LGSK lineups kind of worked, where Fallen was the original opener with his op, and that's why he was so obsessed early on with getting like a pick early on, because his team was incredible at power play situations and 5v4s, and they would always close it out. And then the player who could close it out if like some shit went out of whack was Coldzera. And then he had the same exact like theme going on in the current SK with Fur and Coldzera right now. And then another example is Liquid. They worked like this too, where it's like Twist breaks open the round and then Elige closes it out. So Elige is kind of taking on a Coldzera role. It's not exactly the same, but how they function in the team is similar, where Coldzera closes it out and then Elige also closes it out for his team. So this is generally what I've been thinking about for building up teams, where you need a player who's, as like Vugo says, you need different types of star players, where you need like an aggressive star player, one who like was willing to go in, a space maker, so to speak, and you need like a defensive sort of star player. And when you look at a bunch of teams, this kind of explains a lot of problems within different teams. So for instance, the old NIP had no space creators. Like they were all fairly passive until Draken came onto the team. The current Envious, even though they beat NIP, I feel like they have a huge problem just in terms of a complete lack of space creation. Like they don't have any aggressive star players. So it feels kind of off. Like they need, I don't even know who they could get, but they definitely need somebody like that. When you talk about the old North, the entire problem with that team is they have no closer, and then that's kind of fixed once Valde comes into the team, because he's playing the lurk role obviously, but he's also like helping them close the rounds, and his team play is helping them like clutch out those retakes and post match situations, stuff like this. So it is generally how I've been coming to like construct rounds, just based off of how star players work within their teams. And that's it for now. See you later.